All right, so now we'll pick up. I just finished Ecclesiastes 5, going through verse 7. Now we're going to pick up in verse 8. And right away, we're going to see the result of the love of money. And this is important terminology. It's not the result of money. It's the result of the love of money. A clear distinction in our text. And it starts with this. If you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter. For the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. But this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. So you may see this at first glance, that doesn't have anything to do with the love of money, but it's to set up for what's to follow. So we already saw portions of Ecclesiastes talking about oppression. When you see oppression happening and no one to comfort those who are oppressed. And before that we see when wickedness is in the place of righteousness, right? This is kind of cyclical. And if you remember back to our very first message through Ecclesiastes in chapter 1, he talks about the cycle of things. And so his very letter is reflecting that cycle that he's already talked about in the very beginning, that he set up at the very beginning of this book. And so now he's repeating that point, but it's a little bit different this time. Because here he's not just talking about where there are people who oppress the poor and where justice is violated. He's talking about that, right? Violation of justice and righteousness. But do not be amazed at this. This happens. This corruption should not surprise us. We live in a fallen world. And he's going into great detail to outline how this fallen world has all these things that ultimately seem to lead to despair and depression because they leave you feeling empty. And so if you see this, don't be amazed at it. Why? Well, the high official who's causing this oppression is watched by another high official, and there are higher ones over them. Right? Now, this can be taken in one of two ways. It can be that this guy is going to be corrupt, but he's going to give an account to the higher official who's over him. And if he is still corrupt, then it's going to go to the next higher official, and ultimately all the way to the king who's committed to cultivated fields. So it could be that is the point of this text, that he's saying, hey, don't be amazed at this, don't be surprised by this, because this high official is being watched by another one, and that accountability is going to go up, 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 up. But actually in the context, it's also very possible, and I would say maybe even more likely in the structure of this, that instead of it being, do not be amazed at the matter, for this one's watched by this one, he's going to give an account. It's this one is corrupt, then it goes to the next level of corruption, and the next level of corruption, and it's again corruption and corruption and corruption all the way from the top down. Don't be amazed, because we live in a fallen world where this happens, and you've heard the phrase, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? That's a common phrase that we've heard repeated, and we see that, right? If someone's in great power, oftentimes, I don't know what it's like to be in these high positions, especially as a king over lands, a king over people, but I can imagine there are temptations that come upon them that I can't imagine and I can't fathom, to the point where, there's an opportunity here to get my own. Instead of seeking to serve the people that I'm called to serve, I'm going to go after my own. And so this idea of one high official, hey, don't be amazed at this, because this high official is watched by the next one, and there's a higher one over them, and ultimately it ends, as verse 9 says, but this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. Now that's an interesting structure of that sentence as well, because there is an idea where if you have a king who's committed to the cultivation of fields, you have a king who's committed to making the most of the land that he's ruling over, it would be gain in every way, because that would be prioritized. And in a situation where there is no corruption, then ideally everyone would benefit. As the kingdom flourishes, the people of the kingdom should also flourish, right? So in one sense, that is a very high possibility that could be the case, that this gain for land could result in that. However, if this corruption is there, then perhaps this trickle down that should go from the top to the bottom doesn't quite make it to the bottom, because there can be corruption. And his point here is, don't be amazed at this. We've talked about this already. There's oppressors at times who should be operating in righteousness and out of justice, and they're holding down those amongst us who are poor and who are the low of the lows, and they take advantage of them in their lowly position, and they elevate themselves in their high position instead of caring for them. So don't be amazed when you see this and when you experience this. And then he continues, and I think this is what helps to give us clarity around what's mentioned in these verses. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is hevel, is vanity, meaningless. It is that thing that seems substantive but is not. You can't grasp it. So this is an interesting one, right? And then he continues, when goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? And this little statement, sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. See, so we see this outline here. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money. I don't want to say fast forward, but if you look ahead to the New Testament writings, you see in 1 Timothy chapter 6, the Apostle Paul writes about this idea of the love of money being the root of all kinds of evil, right? And this gets so misconstrued in our society, as does the idea of who's rich versus who's poor in our world. But I think the idea being that people will often say money's bad, don't use, whatever. Money in and of itself is not bad. It's a resource that can be used for good or bad. Recognizing that, right? But the love of money, if you are someone who loves money, you'll never be satisfied with that money. You can look at some of the wealthiest people in the world, and they're still going for more. They could just sail off into the sunset. They could stop working their tails off, making more money, but they're just not satisfied with what they have, and they want to go for more. And I'm not saying that they should just be lazy and go sit on the beach and, sip beverages or whatever, just kick up their feet and not worry about a thing. But there is a place by which sometimes they're driven so much by money that they want more. I read a quote recently, or heard a quote of someone who is incredibly wealthy, and I'm not trying to be coy by not saying the name. I can't remember who it was who said it, but it was an incredibly wealthy person. And someone asked him, hey, which million of your millions that you made was the best million, was the most satisfying of your millions? And he said, the next million. And I was like, boy, that's an interesting thing, right? This idea that if we are loving our money, we'll never be satisfied with what we have. And that's why when Paul writes to Timothy in chapter 6 of 1 Timothy, we see him talking about how godliness with contentment is great gain, right? Because in that context, people are preaching that having the Lord will make you rich. They were teaching a prosperity gospel before it was popularized in our day. Nothing new under the sun like we see in Ecclesiastes, right? And so this idea that they were saying, coming to God, and if you're a child of the king, you'll live like a king. This kind of false teaching that makes you trust in the Lord so that you get rich in this life rather than pursuing riches in the life to come. And so this is the point. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. It's interesting. I think maybe some of us have had the privilege of going to other cultures. In fact, I was talking with some people at the men's retreat recently who are traveling to different cultures, and you see and experience different things when you're traveling in the world. And sometimes you just see a level of poverty that I didn't know when I've seen it at times. I did not even know existed. And yet, you could find a bunch of kids in another area, another part of the world, who just, like a tin can, becomes like everything. It becomes a toy. It becomes a rocket. Then it becomes a ball. I don't know how you can make it into a ball, but whatever it is, they have the simplest of things, and yet they were able to find contentment in this simple thing. And then sometimes I can look at my own life and be like, man, am I struggling to find contentment with all that I have? I have so much. And I like to encourage my kids, hey, do you need another toy? Are you sure you need another toy? I don't think you need another toy. And I'm like, well, did I need that other tool? I don't know if I needed that other tool. I probably could. It's just kind of this thing where like, we can just be wrapped up at times with the temporal things, thinking if I have this, I'll be so excited, I'll be so happy, I'll be able to do this, that, and the other. And ultimately, what happens with these toys? Like I remember growing up, you get a new toy for Christmas. I swear the box was more fun than the toy. Like how many times we make like, I don't know, whatever it is, but you can make a box in any number of things, and you can imagine this, that, or the other. But sometimes if it's a love of money, then what you have never satisfies. And you get that next thing, and for just a split second, that's what I needed. I needed that promotion. I needed that raise. I needed this new toy, this new thing. And then ultimately, oh man, I'm still not satisfied with this. I need that next thing. And so this is a danger that I think any one of us can fall into if we're not on guard, that the love of money will lead us to dissatisfaction. And if you love your wealth, you'll be dissatisfied with your income, right? You'll never find satisfaction with what you have. You'll never be able to be content if your love is in the temporal. And that's what he's getting at here. You can love the temporal things, and he'll continue on. In fact, I might as well continue on in this. Because then he says, when goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? So, hey, our goods are increasing, but so are the needs around me that are there, and I get to see this happen, and this is all I'm seeing, and I'm still not satisfied. And then you get to verse 12. Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. That's interesting. Have you ever gone to bed like after just a heavy labored day, like you just worked from sun up to sundown, and maybe you even worked through meals, and you're like, I skipped it. Did I eat lunch? Did I eat dinner? I don't even know. And you're so tired, you just zonk out. Anyone ever had that experience? Like your stomach's not full, but you worked so hard, you just worked yourself to just sleep. And that's what he's talking about. When you're laboring, when you're working, you also don't have the worries that we can have when we're worried with much things, with many materials. And that, again, that's not to say that material possessions are bad, but when they consume our hearts and they consume our minds, that's when they become a problem. And so the sweet slumber that comes from the laborer, he doesn't have these worries, and also he's exhausted himself working, so he could go to sleep even without much in his stomach. But have you ever been on the other side of this, where you overdid it at dinner, or you ate too much too late, and then you're like, oh, indigestion, oh, I roll over, oh, man, this was a bad idea. Anyone else ever? I've experienced both of these things at different times. Maybe some of you are in that boat where you're like, oh, I shouldn't have that second steak or whatever it was. Like I just had too much meat. The meat sweats. Now I can't sleep, right? Anyway, the full stomach, though, of the rich will not let him sleep. This idea that, man, you're so full and the stomach is filled and it can cause issues in and of itself. And so this idea being that, hey, the laborer doesn't have these concerns, and yet the rich who has all these things, man, he's not sleeping. What is that indicating? It's a lack of peace. Right? That's what that point is. And I know some of you probably sleep really nicely at night, and I'm so thankful for you guys. You have it great that way. Some of us don't have that same blessing of like, man, if I get 8 hours, Amanda's checking my pulse 2 hours earlier. I promise you that much. But this is a reality whereby those who, he's just kind of setting it up where you can get good slumber. You can have a peace. That's what this is about. You can have peace. You can rest, have peace when you're not obsessing over and when your love isn't driving you for more material goods, for more money, more finances. Got to get that next dollar. Instead, if you're content with what you have, which is what the imagery is here of this labor, he's content with what he has. He's worked hard and he's able to sleep sweetly. He has peace. But this rich man, with the fullness of his stomach, he can't sleep. And then he continues, there is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. And he is father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. And this is his point. Not that it's so sad that the man lost all his stuff in a bad venture, but this reality that none of us can carry anything with us. Right? When we leave, if we amass all this wealth and our hope rests in what we've amassed, in these material goods and this, we can't bring it with us into glory. Those are not the treasures that we are to store up for ourselves. And so when our heart is bound up in them, and you labor so hard, all my toil for all this purpose, right? That's what he's saying, and he continues even to kind of outline this further, right? As he came from his mother's womb, so he shall, he shall go again. Naked as he came. What does that mean? I mean, he didn't come out fully clothed, right? He came out with nothing. That's the whole point. He's going to leave this world with nothing. Can't take any of the things he's amassed with him. He does talk about how he had a son. He's a father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand to give to his son, to leave to his son. There's nothing to leave to him, but ultimately, even if he leaves it to his son, as we saw earlier in Ecclesiastes, who knows if his son's not going to be a fool, right? He saw that. I work for all these things. I might leave it to a fool, this idea. But ultimately, it's a grievous evil, he said. It's an evil. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt. He held on to these riches and he valued them so highly that it ultimately resulted in his hurt. And then he lost them, and it was even more hurtful in that regard. And then it continues, this is also a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Remember he said this phrase before, a chasing after the wind? He's toiling for something that's in the wind. The wind, you can't grab the wind. It blows on past. He's toiling for the wind. Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness and much vexation and sickness and anger. Lest we think that the secret to happiness in life is amassing more wealth, you don't need to look any further than Hollywood. You don't need to look further than professional sports. Like some of the wealthiest in the world, and they are some of the most miserable people in their lives. And many of them get so depressed by the end of their lives that they ultimately, they determine sometimes that they don't think life is even worth living, even though they've had all that this world has to offer: wealth, fame, adoration of fans, all the things that we think that's got to lead to a happy life, a fulfilled life, and nothing does. And they get to this place where they've had it all. I remember reading a quote years ago from Jim Carrey talking about this idea that, man, he wishes everyone could taste fame for a moment and have riches and fame for just a moment so they could understand that it will never make them happy. And there is this reality whereby we can look at others, we can play the comparison and go, man, if I had that person's resources, if I had that person's notoriety or whatever. Nope. Ultimately, this is the reality. When you're looking into those things or looking to those things for satisfaction, it results in all your days being eaten in darkness and much vexation and sickness and anger. Because all the money in the world can't prevent an illness, right? I mean, it can't. I mean, there may be treatment options that are more available to you more quickly, whatever, like, sure, but you still can't prevent getting sick. And ultimately, you could be the richest man who ever lived, and you're still going to taste death at some point. Unless the Lord brings you home before you ever taste it. But your days on this earth will still come to an end, and that's his point. So then what's the solution if the love of money leads to this kind of life? Boy, that leaves you kind of like, okay, well, where do we go from here? Well, the solution is love for the Lord. That's the solution. Instead of having a love for the things of this world, have it be transformative that you would have a love for the things of the Lord. So that's the solution. And he says this here. This begins to sound like a refrain. This phrasing here, a refrain throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. Though the ultimate conclusion comes in chapter 12, we've heard this kind of phrasing multiple times. Behold, what I've seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him. For this is his lot. Right? Is this sounding familiar? Because he said this almost verbatim. And then he continues, everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. This is the gift of God. So he just talked about how these rich men, you can't enjoy it. And now he's telling you to enjoy it. Well, what's the distinction? Acknowledging that this is a gift from God to be enjoyed by God's hand. I've said this before, but it's not the thing in and of itself that satisfies. It's the Lord who provides all things who satisfies. And so when things can be received from the hands of the Lord with a proper perspective, not holding on to the thing itself, the wealth itself, or the material good itself, but holding on to the Lord who provides all things and saying, Lord, I am thankful for what you've provided. Thank you for the ability to work. Thank you for the income that I receive to be able to support my family. Thank you for your provision of this meal, of these friends. When we have a heart of gratitude, it changes everything. All of a sudden, the things that would have led to vexation and anger and frustration because they're empty in and of themselves as pursuits to an end, they ultimately enhance then our worship of our Lord. And that's the point of this. God has given him. This is his lot. This is the allotment from the Lord for your life. That's what he says in verse 18. What I've seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun. The few days of his life, right? You could live to be super old. It's still the few days of your life. It's still so brief in the realm of eternity. Like comparing it there is no comparison. It's like a twinkle of an eye, right? It's just a snap of a finger. It's so brief. And so in this short life that we have, what are we to do? Well, it's fitting to eat and drink as the Lord provides these things and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him. For this is his lot. I don't think it's a mistake that Jesus calls himself the bread of life, right? I don't think it's a mistake that he talks about how the wine, the cup, when we do communion, how that represents his blood that's poured out, right? And also how he talks about being living water. Whoever drinks of him will never thirst again. And talking about enjoyment and all the toil. What does he talk about? My joy I give to you, not as the world gives do I give to you. See, all these things that we clamor for as human beings in this world, to eat, to drink, to find enjoyment in life, all those things are wrapped up and found in Jesus alone. It's no mistake that he uses those terms to define himself. Because just as we need those things for our subsistence, in order to exist, for as sustenance for us, we need food, physical food. We need water, physical water. But we also can't live on bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God, according to Scripture. And that's what Jesus understood, and that's what Jesus came to bring us to himself, to recognize that. So what have we seen to be good and fitting? Yeah, eat and drink and find enjoyment. And when you do so recognizing that God has given you these days of your life. It's God who's given us life. Temporal life in this world, physical life, but eternal life through Jesus. All of life is at the hands of God. And when you recognize that, then you can actually receive the things. Instead of it being the rat race of humanity where we just go after this and after the next thing, all of a sudden you can be satisfied with so much less than you ever thought. Because if you have Christ, he gives you this perspective. And at the same time, you could maybe have more wealth and maybe you have more goods, but it has no grip on your heart. Because you recognize that this is not where my value comes from. This is not where my satisfaction comes from. Now I can receive them with gratitude and give worship and praise to the God who provides all things. And then verse 20 gives you this beautiful picture. For he will not much remember the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. That's a beautiful verse. Not because, we don't want to remember our earlier days of our lives, but this idea of when he's talking about how our days are filled with vexation and hardship and difficulty, now it's, hey, but God keeps you occupied with joy in your heart. Not joy in your possessions, not joy in what you've amassed for yourself, joy in your heart. And when you have joy, the joy of the Lord in your heart, and the joy of the Lord is your strength, when that happens, it transforms everything. And that's what he's getting at. So then he's going to move from this into another section where he moves kind of beyond just the wealth, but he says, now I'm going to say you're disillusioned with seeking happiness in possessions or position. So whether it's position, high position, or possessions, material goods, disillusioned with that. It didn't lead to the happiness you thought. He says in chapter 6, there is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil. He's talked about that. See, and I do think this idea of God not giving him power to enjoy them, it's not that it's not available for that person to enjoy them. Right? By submitting unto the Lord, they would receive the power, the ability to enjoy what the Lord has given to them. But people who have this, it's a hypothetical man. God's given all this wealth and possessions and honor. And it could be Solomon speaking of himself in this way too. It's very possible. But he's saying, God gives all this wealth, possessions, and honor, yet he can't enjoy them. Instead, a stranger enjoys them. Isn't that interesting? Like this whole phrase, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Like maybe this thing means nothing to you, but if someone else were to come into possession of that, it could mean the world to them. It could transform their lives in a huge way, potentially. But this whole idea, he says it's vanity, it's hevel, it's a grievous evil. It's another evil. Why? Because, again, you can't take it with you. God provides these things, and yet you don't enjoy them. This man does not enjoy them. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. So he's saying it's better to have never seen life outside the womb than to go through life like this and not be able to be satisfied. To go through life and never have satisfaction. I say, he says, that a stillborn child is better off than he. It comes in vanity, it goes in darkness. In darkness its name is covered. You never even know the name of this child who's stillborn. And he's saying that child is better off than the man who lives all his days and cannot find satisfaction. Why is that? Well, it starts with soul satisfaction in verse 3. It's his soul. His soul is not satisfied. Your soul is not meant to be satisfied by the things of this world ultimately. That's the point. His soul is not satisfied with life good things. And also he has no burial. I would try to dive into that, but I really don't have a full explanation of that one for you. So I'm sure there is more significance to that phrase, but I think my guess would be that a burial is like a memorial to the person. It's a remembrance for that person in some way. And in this case, if you have no place to be buried, you have none of that, that it's, again, an empty thing. In that case, a stillborn child is better. Name is covered in darkness. Moreover, it, talking about this stillborn child, has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to the one place. He's not saying, it's not universalism. He's not saying everyone goes into glory with the Lord. He's saying everyone will ultimately have their lives come to an end in this earth, in this world. But this idea here, it finds rest rather than he. I think there are multiple clues in Scripture that talk about this, and I think about how much we had Sanctity of Life Month not long ago, or Sanctity of Life Week, but the unborn, those in the womb, when they don't taste daylight, when they don't see the world, recognizing that our God is good, and in that they can rest securely in Him. It's hard to think of much more impactful realities than that. So he's saying it's not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest. Rather than this guy who toiled all his life and has no satisfaction. His soul cannot find satisfaction. All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage has the wise man over the fool, and what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. Ever heard the phrase, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush? Right? It's this idea that receiving, verse 9 here, better is the sight of the eyes and the wandering of the appetite than an ever-growing appetite. I want more, I need more. Better to be content with what's in front of you, what's in your sight, what you see right here, what you have, than having an appetite that wanders, that keeps growing and growing. This also is vanity and striving after the wind. All the toil of a man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. If you're looking to the things of this world to satisfy, it never will. Never will. We've been watching, Amanda and I have watched this TV show called Alone, and it's like they drop these guys off in the Arctic, guys and men and women, and they're isolated. They live isolated, and we watched, I don't even know what season it was, but we watched it not long ago, and there was a competitor on this one show. The whole point is they drop you off. Has anyone here familiar with this show? So they drop them off, and they're trying to make a go of it in the Arctic or in some crazy environment. They're on their own. They have very few tools that they're allowed to bring. They have some, but they're limited in what they can take, and they're completely isolated. They record themselves. I'm sure it's all completely as it seems on the show, that they're totally isolated. Anyway, but the point is the one who lasts the longest wins $500,000 at the end of the season. And so it's interesting because you start to see as the days, at first there's a real excitement, everyone's going. Well, in this latest season, there was a competitor named Timber, or the season we watched, I don't know if it's the latest one. I think his real name's Timothy, but he goes by Timber. But it was interesting to watch this guy. He goes through the show, he gets a moose early on in the season. If you don't like spoilers and you haven't seen it, I'm sorry. He gets a moose early on in the season. But it's interesting. He's got kids. He does humanitarian work all around the world. He goes into difficult countries, it sounds like difficult areas, and serves people. He just has a heart for serving people. And as the show goes on, you start to realize he's driven by his love for Jesus to do these things. And so he's getting there. It's on, I think it's day 83 or something, or day 87. He's been there a long time. And it's just frigid outside, negative degrees. He's built a shelter, all these things. And he's like, I could stay out here. In fact, I'll read a quote to you because that's better than me trying to paraphrase it. He said this, I've received everything I've asked for out here except the money. I have a vision for the future. I know what's next for our family. I could make this go on much longer, but all I'd be thinking about each day is the money and trying to impress people or something. He continued on, what if I go ahead and win this money? What'll happen to me in my work that I've dedicated my life to? Would this money create a barrier between me and the very people that I would be trying to help? He said, I think I've received everything besides the money that I could possibly receive from something like this. Again, he's living off the land, he's hunting. And this is amazing. At every turn, this guy had what he needed throughout the season. Like some of the guys, they try to drop a line on the ice to get some fish so they can sustain their lives because, again, they don't like get food rations. They've got to live off the land. And he said this, I've seen God feed me every day on this land. So in my heart, I know that he'll provide the money day by day so we can continue to do this humanitarian work that we love. What more could I ask? And he continues and says, I want my children to see the true victory in the immaterial things like integrity and joy and resilience and the ways that I've walked through this journey, which I know I can be proud of. And I just want my children to see those as the real victory rather than $500,000. So he picked up his phone, dialed whatever number they dial, and said, this is Timber. I'm officially tapping out. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so this happens, right? Here's the point, though. These competitors are like all motivated by the money. This money's going to transform my life. I'm going to get $500,000. And little by little, they all fall off. He was down to the last two. And he recognized, I've gotten what I had. He said, I had questions for God that I've had answered on my trip out here. The Lord has done a work in my heart while I've been out here. He talks through these things. And then this idea, I've seen God feed me every day. He recognizes this money, I don't need this money. The real victory is in trusting in the Lord every day to provide and feed my family. And so he tapped out, and another guy won because of that. But ultimately, he's saying that's not my victory. My victory would not have been in winning $500,000 after taxes, $200,000 probably. Right? That, as life-changing as that money might have been, he recognized, hey, it's not the money that has a whole, the money will not lead me to a greater happiness. It won't lead me to a better life. In fact, it might impede the work that I'm trying to do, that I've been called by God to do. I've done what I need to do. Though he got a moose, for crying out loud. He still had meat available if he wanted to prolong this. But he was content. He said, I don't need that money to be satisfied. I've gotten everything. I've received everything that I might have wanted from this land, that I could have asked for. Clarity, understanding, appreciation for God's creation. It was really interesting. So anyway, I'm not saying, hey, this is an awesome show, everyone should watch it. But this was really, it was just, I was compelled when I saw this storyline start to develop. And then I was preparing for this message, and I was like, man, how cool is that to see someone throw in the towel though he didn't need to. He wasn't exhausted. Most of the time when they do it, they're like so depressed and overwhelmed that they can't make it, or they're medically evacuated. He's just like, I don't need the money. I'm officially tapping out with a smile on his face, on his gaunt face. They all look so skinny. Anyway, all that to say, it's a perspective, right? It's about perspective. And he recognized, I don't need that money. I've gained what I needed to in this land. I've seen God provide. He will continue. And so we continue with the last couple verses here. Whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. All right, so he's continuing on after seeing all these things, making all these observations. Now he's saying, what has come to be has already been named. It's known what man is, that he's not able to dispute with one stronger than he. He's referencing God himself. You can't take down God. The more words, the more vanity. So as you try to argue with God, you try to take up a dispute with him, it just gets more and more vain. It gets more and more meaningless and empty. And what is the advantage to man to try and contend with God in that way? And then verse 12, for who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? Who knows what's good for man? I think it's a rhetorical question here. Who can tell man what will be after? It's all the Lord. It's the Lord. He knows what's good for man. And so for our takeaways today, recognizing a few key takeaways that lead to one big one. The love of money leads to wanting more and more. Not having money itself, but the love of money will lead to an insatiable appetite for more. True contentment comes from loving the Lord first. Then, like we see Paul in Philippians 4, you can be content whether you have much or little, because it's through Christ that you do those things. Contentment comes from loving the Lord first. So if my first love is the Lord, then actually I can have contentment. And I won't have a love for money that drives me wanting more and more. And next, enjoyment in this life comes when we look to God, right? True contentment comes, but even enjoyment in this life. Enjoyment in this life comes when we look to God. Seeing all as a gift from God enables us to find joy. And I think it's easy to see, I shouldn't say it's easy to lose sight of it too, but it can be easy to see, like, when you get an unexpected, I don't know, any kind of blessing, whether it's someone blesses you in some unexpected way, materially, or just you see some things where you're like, that's a clear blessing from the Lord. But ultimately, seeing all as a gift from God, seeing the hardship as a gift from God, as James talks about, seeing trials as a gift because it's a chance to learn, like seeing all that we receive in this life, that we face in this life, it can all be viewed in some sense as a gift from God, where he's going to refine our character, he's going to make us new, but especially when it comes to material things, seeing those as gifts from the Lord. It will enable us to find joy not in the things in and of themselves, but in the Lord who gives these good gifts, because every good and perfect gift comes from above. This world and everything in it will come to an end. If that's the case, why would we hope in it? This world then cannot fulfill people with eternality in their hearts. Remember earlier in Ecclesiastes, God has set or placed eternity in the hearts of man. So that's the reality here. This world will never fully fulfill people who have eternality in their hearts, as God has created us with this eternality. We have eternal things. We have the eternal reality in our hearts by God. And when that's the case, nothing of this world that's fleeting, that's fading away, can ever fully satisfy. It's all going to come to an end. Just as we came in naked, we're going to go out naked too. Came in with nothing, we'll leave with nothing. And finally, the eternal Lord is over all time, possession, and life. He's over it all, as we saw in those last few verses. Who can answer these questions that he's saying? Who can say what is good for a man to do in his short, brief life? Only the eternal Lord over all things. And trusting in Jesus is the way to eternal satisfaction. That's it. And when we walk with Christ, we are satiated, we are satisfied in him when we walk with him. And yet so often, if we're all honest, there are times where we don't find that satisfaction in him. Oh, I love you, Jesus. But man, right now, I just want this little thing too. I just want that. Like, we just don't find our full satisfaction in him. Instead of holding things open, they were like, but Lord, I want this. Let me just hold on to this one. You can have all this world, but give me Jesus, as we sing in a song, right? That should be the cry of our hearts. And oftentimes it isn't. Oftentimes it's, thank you, Jesus, for life in you. Also, could you get me this thing? I'd love it if I could have this experience, this good, this whatever. And so recognizing that it's not wrong to ask the Lord for his provision of things, right? In fact, he outlines that in the Lord's Prayer. That you ask the Lord to give us this day our daily bread. Right? Give us what we need for this day. Lord, provide for us what it is that we need. So let us seek to trust in Jesus, because he's the only way to eternal satisfaction. And so really the overall takeaway, as what we saw in our text, love for the temporal, exceeding love for our eternal Lord always leads to dissatisfaction. But that's not the full statement. But in Christ, satisfaction is found. Period. Or exclamation point, if you will. Let's pray.